Marketing Your Private Practice is a podcast where you'll learn easy to implement tips and strategies to grow your business without spending all day online. I'm your host, Kathy Colaiacovo, and I teach practitioners the Thrive marketing method to create simple and streamlined plans by focusing on long-term strategies, not just social media. Discover ways to spend less time on your marketing, attract more clients, and build the financial freedom that comes with a thriving practice. One where you have time left in your day for the people and things that matter to you. Hey, private practice heroes, it's Kathy Colaiacovo, and thanks for tuning into today's podcast, which is the final lesson in the series on events and conferences. And what we've been focusing on is ways to maximize the ROI you get when you're attending, speaking, sponsoring, or even having an exhibitor table at an event and conference that you're attending as part of your business marketing activities. So today we're diving into the third step of the 3 things I shared that you should be doing before you attend any event or conference. And that is all about tracking your ROI, your return on investment. So we started this whole series in episode 103 discussing the importance of these 3 things to do before you even go. Setting your goals, planning the actions to achieve those goals, and then tracking the ROI to find out, did it work? Did you actually achieve those goals? And did you get results from your time and activities at the event? Whenever you're attending something that takes you away from your business, it is time away. It's time and money. So you want to make sure that you're getting something out of it. In this episode, we're going to talk about how you can track your ROI, and I'm going to give you specific ideas on what to track and ways you can track it so that you know what is really happening with the results that you're getting or you're not getting. It's key that you actually see the real results and understand their impact. I often find folks are relying on their memory to decide or determine if something went well or not. And honestly, our memories can be unreliable, especially as we age. And that's why tracking the numbers is so important. A lot of people don't value this task or this activity, and they definitely don't do it. But without tracking of the actual items, the actual numbers, it's really hard to understand the true details of what happened at an event. And I've seen this firsthand during marketing assessments with my Thrive Marketing Academy members. When we compare their recollections of numbers and sales with actual data, actual numbers, there's often a very big difference. Whether I'm asking them how many clients they had this past week on the books or the last month, or how many sales they got in an event recently that they were attending, the numbers that they often pull up from their memory are very different from the numbers that they send me after I send them off to go track and count the actual numbers. A lot of people are really surprised to discover their assumptions about their business don't always align with reality. But I'm not. This comes back from days of tracking time when I worked with clients back then. I know that if I guessed my time, if I forgot to track it, I would always underestimate what the real time was. So that's why I think it's important that you stop and actually get the real numbers. And a specific meeting that I had with one of my members this past year, she had gone to an event and she came back. And when we were talking about it in her marketing strategy session, she said that the sales barely covered the table fee. But when we reviewed her current client list, she mentioned that she had a group booking coming up. And when I asked where she got the booking, she said they'd met her at the event. And I was like, was that booking counted in your sales from the event? No, it was not, because the person reached out to her after the event to book it. But here's the thing. That person's initial contact with my client was, in fact, at the event. So if she hadn't been there, she wouldn't have gotten the booking. That is a sale from the event. And when I went through the whole scenario like this, she understood. She had not considered it a sale as part of the event. It was, in fact, some ROI that she got in the way of sales from going to that event. So the truth was, when she looked at all the numbers, she did make more than her table fee. And I also said any future sales from that group of people can also be tracked back as ROI to the event. It's all a domino effect. And until we walked through it all this way, she really hadn't understood that those kinds of sales are part of your ROI from certain events. So when we tracked her numbers, that brought it all to light. And that's why it's so important for everyone to do this, because it does provide a clearer view of your business, your sales, and where they came from. And all of that information is going to help you make informed decisions. Decisions like, was the event worth it? Did the clients you booked fit your business model of an ideal client? Or were they real duds to work with? Even knowing that kind of info helps you plan for the next time. Maybe you change your message. Maybe you go to a different event. Maybe there's something you can look at to make sure that you don't get the duds and that you get more of the ideal clients. But when you don't take the time to reflect and track and record what actually happened, real numbers, not your memories, then you're never going to get insights that will tell you this kind of information. Insights that tell you, do you go back to that event or not? Do you just go and adjust your messaging, your flyers, your actions? So, tracking is key, and I want you to really understand the importance of it and don't dismiss it as something that people talk about, but that you never really have to do. I often find there is a common reason people don't track the ROI. Either one, it's confusing as to what do they track, like what numbers are you even looking at, and how do you do it? And that's what I want to cover on this lesson today is giving you very specific ideas of what and how to track so that you can gather that event ROI that you're looking for when it comes to the events and conferences you're attending. What you track can vary a lot between different types of businesses too. It will also depend on your goals that you set before you go to the event and the actions that you take at the event too. Well, actions you take at the event and actions you do before and after as well. All of that is going to really be the determining factors on what numbers you specifically should be tracking. And this is why it's not typically something you can punch into a program and pull out the ROI by hitting some numbers in. It's often done manually because there aren't a lot of systems. At least there's not a lot of systems that the typical solopreneur or practice owner can afford to use. Systems that might automatically do this and not cost thousands or hundreds of dollars. Because often I find the clients that I work with are not in a position to spend $1,000 a month on having this great tracking system that will do all of this automatically for them. That's why the how of what I'm going to share you today comes down to manual tracking with a combo of a few systems as well. So, what we're going to cover today is going to help you in all of the roles we've been talking about in determining that ROI, whether you were an attendee, a speaker, a sponsor, or an exhibitor at an event. And honestly, a lot of this tracking is the same kind of things you want to think about tracking when it comes to making sales from consults and referrals of clients as well. So, the first thing that you're going to need is some sort of place or a system or a dashboard of some sort to record all this data that you're going to collect. Okay, I'll be honest, I said all, but it's not a ton of data. I just want to say that here. Okay. I personally used the marketing stats tracker that I created for this. I just added a new tab in it. It's something that I do have out there that is free for people to download. So if you've never looked at this or you don't have a copy, you might want to grab the free marketing stats tracking template I have that's on my website. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's a really good tool to help you begin tracking a lot of your marketing efforts. And while it doesn't include a specific section in there for tracking events, because everybody's numbers and information they want to track are going to be very different when it comes to events and conferences, but you can definitely add something in there and customize it for yourself for your own event tracking. Plus, it will give you a good starting point. There is a lot of other information in there that, as a business or practice owner, you should be tracking when it comes to your marketing and your business. So, if you haven't downloaded that yet, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. If you want to jump to it right now, it's simply at pepperitmarketing.com/free stats. So, When you take this tracker out, that's where you want to think about, okay, what am I going to enter in it? What do I want to track? Where you typically want to start with what you're tracking is looking back at the goals for your event. That is going to guide you for what you need to track. And the role you played and the goals you set. So the goals and the roles are all going to factor into this. What are you going to track here? Because the different role that you had at the event, if you were a speaker, your goals are probably going to be very different than if you were simply attending the event. Same goes for sponsors and exhibitors. So it's all going to be a little different. But what you want to do is refer back to the goals that you set. The goals you had for your event are going to be what guide you on what you need to track for numbers. So the role you play also determines what kind of goals you set, because the actions and the goals that you take as an attendee differ a lot from what you would do as a speaker or a sponsor. So you can refer back to each of the previous episodes in episodes 104, 105, and 106, where we covered the actions and the goals that you would be looking at, whether you were attending, speaking, or being a sponsor or an exhibitor at an event. So go back there if you haven't listened to those. If you have and you've been thinking about it already, that's where you want to start planning what you're going to track. It's all going to relate to those types of goals and the actions that you were doing. So one of the first things that you look at here is tracking connections, because almost every role that you play, you want to make connections. And for a lot of people, that just means the people you're going to connect and talk with. This is typically more what an attendee would be looking at. So what you do here is create a column in your tracking dashboard, whatever that's going to be, whether it's one you have on your own or if you download the free version that I have. So you create a column in there for the goal of connections. And you want to make sure that you take the time and enter in how many connections you made. I would also include your follow-up, because that's part of your actions here. So with each of those episodes, we talked about different actions that you would look at. So there's things you want to do before you go, things you want to do when you're there, and then things you want to do afterwards, which is a lot of the follow-up, which we all like to avoid. And I'll promise, if you don't do the follow-up, you're not going to get really great results. That inaction of follow-up is often why there's not great ROI on connections going anywhere from an event. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to all these different things that you wanted to do to build the connections, and then you want to build on them. So you do have to take the time to go in, and typically here we're looking at, manually writing in the person's name or typing it in to your tracking area or dashboard, and then keeping a result of that, keeping numbers so that if you do talk to them, maybe they sign up. Maybe at some point they refer somebody to you. So all of that becomes ROI that gets tracked back to those connections that you made. So this is definitely manual tracking. And unless you get hundreds of cards at an event and you need one of those old-fashioned card readers that I think I used to have one in 2010 or so, that we would throw the cards through and then they would spit them into a spreadsheet and put all the information there. Honestly, unless you get hundreds and hundreds, which if you're attending a conference or an event as an attendee making connections, I'm not sure how valuable hundreds of names will be unless you're there for a really long time and there's thousands of people there. So you're usually going to have enough as one person you can go in and type them and enter them into your tracking sheet or dashboard. And then you want to keep track of your contacts and connections with them. And what you're going to do with their names in here is part of your follow-up in other ways. Maybe in the future you get a sale. You want to look back. Is this sale in regards to one of these connections you made somewhere? I've done this before with my tracking. I've had people refer me other clients, and I consider the sale from that referral client part of the ROI from an event if I met somebody at the event in the first place, or if they signed up as a lead. So tracking connections is key. And again, this is a bit of a manual system you're going to do here. When we look at tracking leads, that's another thing people typically want to track. Now, as an attendee, you might have leads, but leads are going to be more key numbers for sponsors, speakers, and exhibitors at events. So, when you have goals that include acquiring new leads, you'll need a way somehow to capture and track the leads. So, maybe you had a sign up sheet at your booth, or maybe you had a draw when you were doing a speaking presentation on stage. There's lots of ways, and we talked about that in the other episode on how you get leads as one of these different people attending the event. So, what you want to do here, have the leads set up in a way that you can track them in the future. So, if you're going to have a sign up for people where they can get a free download, you might want to have a special landing page, which is something I talked about in one of the previous episodes. People will go to that special page to get those bonus resources you have. So, all of that is trackable. You can find out how many leads you got. And at some point in the future, you may end up connecting a sale to one of those leads from the event. So, in order to do this kind of tracking, you need to ensure that you have a unique way to identify the leads from every event that you go to. So, it might be a special form, it might be a special tag in your email system, especially if you're having a sign up for them. The idea is you want to make sure you have a way to have that identification that they came from XX conference. This way, when you start your tracking, you'll know exactly where those leads came from. You'll be able to update the tracking sheet with numbers. And I typically go in there a couple days later, then I go a week later, and I go 2 weeks later. And I look in my email marketing system where I set up the sign up for this special resource that put a special tag on. So I know that if they asked for it and signed up for it, they came from this event. So putting those numbers in there on a regular basis is a key part of this. And then you now have these folks specially identified so that if they purchase from you in the future, you can confidently say, I made XX amount of sales from XX event because you know that person got on your list initially from meeting you at the event, from somehow connecting with you there. So if they buy at any time in the future, that sale gets attributed as ROI to the event. Because if you hadn't been at the event, they wouldn't have met you and the sale wouldn't have happened. And this, again, is something that you can look at in different ways. Maybe you look at somebody refers somebody to you. One of these people you met who became a lead sent someone your way and they became a client. Or maybe they gave you an opportunity to speak at another event. Even different things like that are things that you want to track. When you're tracking leads, you want to be sure that what you're doing is looking at some future benefit that you're getting, an opportunity, a sale, a client, whatever it might be. Can it track back to one of those leads that you got? And again, this is going to be a little more of manual tracking. And the way I do this is when I have consults or sales, I look back at the person who purchased from me, not only where they might have told me where they heard of me first, but I check into my email marketing system to see when and where they first got on my email list, if they're there at all. If they have a tag from an event or a special tag that I know where they came from, that lead and that sale then become ROI back to that event. So, tracking leads is one of the other things that you want to track. The third thing I like to make sure we're tracking, and I've talked a lot about it already, is actual sales. Tracking sales should also be part of your ROI tracking for events and conferences. And in fact, I think it's the most important thing that you should be tracking when it comes to this. You want to know if, again, if that was part of your goal, are you making money or sales from attending these events? For a lot of people, especially going as a speaker, a sponsor, or an exhibitor, sales are going to be one of your ultimate goals. So, tracking sales from the events is something you want to do. Again, it might be a little more manual than we all envision at first, but these numbers are the most important ones for the ROI you're looking at here. And doing this kind of tracking has helped me know exactly how much sales I've had from specific events I've taken part in. In some of the previous episodes, I've told you about different things. I went to a conference, I can track back over $750,000 to either people I met, skills I learned, or contacts that I made at that event. And yes, I've been tracking this for many, many years. It is something that I do because I understand the value that can come from the information from all of those numbers. Keeping a section in your tracker for sales and making sure that you're recording and updating it regularly is going to be really important. And remember, a sale can come from the connections you met, the leads you made. They can come from somebody you met there who referred them to somebody else who sent them your way. And they can happen long after the event, too. So, doing this kind of tracking means paying attention to when you get a new client and taking a minute or two to review where did they come and possibly look into some of your systems that you have to understand where you met the original person first, where that person that is the actual client now came from, and understand where you can attribute the sale in your tracking. And I know we're talking about this for events and conferences, but honestly, this is something I do as well and recommend my clients do regular sales and clients and referrals. And as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be an episode coming out on this because I've actually made a new lead magnet that will give everybody a kickstart with that. So be sure to hit follow where you're listening in because you don't want to miss that episode. And that episode will help you a little more with what we're talking about here. It just dives a little deeper into doing the tracking in a way that's not going back necessarily to an event, but overall tracking of sales. So, one thing I do want to mention here is the talk that I just said a second ago about long term tracking. Tracking isn't something that you're going to just do immediately after the event and then stop. This activity is a marathon, not a sprint, as they say. The ROI from your events will rarely end the week after the event is over. You want to ensure you keep that tracking sheet updated for weeks, months, even years to come. I keep it as a long-term tracking thing, and having that long-term perspective and those long-term numbers also helps you see the full impact of your participation from those events. I talk about that one monster event that I went to. It was in May of 2009. And to this day, 15 years later, I'm doing a little math in my head there, it is still paying me back from the people, the lessons I learned, and the connections I made. It's really critical that you understand the long-term value of all of these events and the activities that you're doing. It's why I can tell you things like, I know I got a specific amount of sales. It was pretty much close to 50,000 from an event that I did in 2012. I invested money in a sponsor booth. I also ran an event in a workshop that day. I got 128 leads from what I did at that event. And those leads turned into sales at the event and sales over a 3-year period. Without long term tracking, you're never going to know results like this. So it is something you do have to keep at. Now, here's where I want to talk about a little more about doing the tracking, because really what I've given you here at this point, what do you track? You track 3 main things when it comes to events and conferences: connections, leads, and sales. Okay. And you do it on a long term basis. But here's the thing. This is where people usually say to me, I love this whole idea, Kathy. I think it's awesome. I think it's phenomenal, the numbers you can share about this, but I just don't have the time to do this. And be honest with me, you're probably thinking the same thing too. You're probably thinking, she is a nut. She's been tracking a conference since 2009. Well, here's the deal. If you are a lot like people that I share this with, and you in fact are saying, it sounds like a lot of work and I just don't have the time for all of this, I want to get a little serious with you for a minute. And I'm going to ask you truthfully, ask yourself, do you really not have the time? Or is this a thought like those ones I talked about earlier when it comes to memory numbers versus reality numbers? I know the folks who work with me and the folks who listen to this podcast, for the most part, I suspect you're all like them if you're listening in here today. You're a solopreneur. Whether you own a private practice or a service-based business, you are probably the person in your business who does most of the marketing and sales for your business. You might do a lot of the admin. Maybe you have a part-time VA or a subcontractor helping you out. For the most part, on average, you're probably getting 5 new clients a week. And probably on average, it is less than that. So, truthfully, tell me, once you have this system set up, do you really not have the time to track the sales, the amount of new clients or new connections or new opportunities that you get every week? Do you really not have time? Or are you kind of exaggerating how much time it's really going to take? Because I'll be honest, for me, it's minutes, if that. Minutes, it's not hours, it's not days. This tracking is not hard to do and doesn't take a lot of time. It is not like we are all tracking 100 sales a day. As much as I know every one of you listening out there would love that, the folks that I work with sign new clients and do these things at a much slower pace. A pace that means you probably do have the time. You can take 2 minutes to check this out as a follow-up or part of your onboarding process for new clients. So you definitely take the time after the event. That might take you 10, 15 minutes at most to get started on those numbers. How many leads did you have? Who are they? And put their names in a list. Then once things get going, as new opportunities come about and new sales happen, you can take a couple minutes for each one of those people that come to you and do some of this as follow-up. It is not complicated. All you are doing here is making note of the client you just booked or the opportunity that you just connected about, and think about the information they gave you. You've probably collected their information. You know their name, you know their email. They've told you something specific about them, probably who referred them to you or that they heard of you, whether it was online or at an event. Whatever it is, they have said something that gave you a hint as to where and how they found you. And this information is critical to your sales and marketing ROI overall, even for events and conferences. So all you have to take the time to do here is record somewhere. Example, use the tracking sheet or a dashboard, whatever you want to use, and check their email in your system and see, do they have any relevant tags that you can track back to an event? Or what I'm going to be talking about in a few weeks is, do they have anything relevant that tracks back to a referral partner or a source that sent you that person your way? Whatever way people got to you, putting that in your tracking dashboard is all we're doing here. That's it. It's not a real time suck here, not if you have some sort of system set up. And that's why I say start off by downloading that free stats tracking template I have. It'll give you some ideas on how to do this thing. And then that's it. It's all ready for you to simply check off or enter the information. And it doesn't take a lot of time, I promise. But as you keep filling in that information in that tracking sheet, you're going to start seeing trends. And that is when and how you're going to notice what's working better or not. You'll see if one event is bringing you more leads, more connections, more sales than others. And with that info, you're now ready to do more of what's working and less of what's not. It's as simple as that. Tracking your event ROI really can be simple. It's just a matter of understanding a few things of what you want to track. We've talked about that today. Knowing the steps that you can do to make it easier. We've talked about that as well. Have something to help you track it, an easy system or a dashboard, a document. Doesn't matter what it is. Get it going and get it started. And then you can do it on a consistent basis. And that's what I really hope you're taking in from this lesson here today. These 3 things that I think are critical for you to understand about how you can be tracking your event ROI and looking at numbers that are going to guide you for future success. 1, I hope you understand how important it is to track the ROI from events and conferences. It is essential information that will help you grow your business. Number 2, you see the value in having some sort of system or a dashboard or a tracking document that will help you track all of this information. And by track that, I simply mean you look at the information, you get the info, and you type it into the tracking document. Number three, I want to make sure that you use this type of system because not only is it going to help you track things, but it actually could help you do some of that follow-up post-event too. It helps you think about after the event. I want to go in there a few days later. I want to look at the leads. I want to look at who might have signed up for that freebie I gave them. I want to see if we got connected on LinkedIn. Whatever it is, it kind of helps you make sure that you're doing the follow-up that was in the list for everybody's actions, no matter if you were an attendee, a speaker, or a sponsor or an exhibitor. So if you need a little help getting that system in place, grab my free template to get started. Then the most important thing is that you commit to updating this regularly after the events that you're attending and then doing it on a consistent basis. Part of what I teach my clients is to do this tracking monthly or quarterly at a minimum. I personally prefer monthly because then you're going to be gathering numbers and information that helps you understand more about your results from all of your marketing, not just events and conferences, but you'll understand as well from your normal online and in-person marketing and networking and referral connecting. The diligence from you taking the time to put in what is really a small, minimal amount of time in tracking, I promise it will pay off when you start seeing the ROI, the real ROI that your numbers are telling you from your efforts that you're doing when you invest time and money to go to an event. It can also help if you track the other items in there for your other marketing too. So you have just a couple action steps for today. If you haven't listened to the first episodes of this series, go back and check out 103 through 106 on the podcast. They have lots of advice on the things you want to do before you go to a conference, setting goals, planning actions, and of course, tracking the ROI. But then there's 3 specific episodes that talk about actions to help you reach goals as an attendee, as a speaker, and as a sponsor or an exhibitor. Once you know all of that and you know what kind of goals you're looking at in actions, then you'll know how to do some of this tracking and what numbers you want to be tracking when it comes to this lesson that I'm sharing today. Get that system in place, and when you do, you'll be able to tell in future exactly what ROI you got from any event that you were at, and you'll know if it's worth going to and doing again or not. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to thrive in practice or business can be helped a lot by knowing the numbers that will tell you exactly what events you want to invest in attending and what ones you want to avoid. Those numbers you track will tell you that exact information. I'll see you next time. You can find all of our show notes and resources mentioned at marketingyourprivatepractice.com. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram at pepperitmarketing and say hi. I'd love to hear any feedback you have, and make sure to rate and review the podcast and hit subscribe on your favorite player so you don't miss any future episodes.